One. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. We're done with Taverns of Time.
Woo!
Back to good old normal arena.
Let's say this. We normally miss something like maybe 3 streams in an entire year. And in the Taverns of Time meta, we miss 2 streams. That is
Well,
probably not a total coincidence.
actually, I was just really busy at work, but still. And
Still,
you were pretty busy with
I was
life
busy
stuff or
with
something.
stuff as well,
Right,
but
right.
it gets to the point where I think I could have shuffled around some stuff if I absolutely needed to, or just killed my sleep by a few hours in stream, which is what we normally do. Um,
Right.
but it got to the point where I was like, all right, we're ready to be out of this meta. And you know what? I don't think it would have actually gotten to that point if one, the Giants thing wasn't didn't happen, right? Like if they made the fix but then did not make Giants get out of control. And two, if they just said that this meta was gonna last until the next expansion. Cause then I would be like, oh, I'm just playing in the meta now. This meta's gonna last like 2 freaking months, right? Like this is the arena.
Right, right. And that would have been okay-ish as well, right? If they just made it the meta, that would have been fine. But it was an event. It's something in which you know that is going to be for an annoyingly long time, but not long enough for it to be like the actual meta.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think it's good if you are if you play a ton of runs or if you play very few. But we're in that awkward spot where we play I think on average, I don't know, 7 runs a week, maybe even a little fewer, and it just get to the point where it's annoying, but without getting to the point where you can master it and get something out of it.
Yep.
Uh,
Basically.
Okay, so today we had Educated Collins on last time, and we're going to have a great. Oh, sorry, we already had a announcement of the next announcement for the next expansion from Blizzard. That went up last week, and it identified July 12th. God, why did I say March? July 12th as the date of the actual announcement of the next expansion. And what that means is that's when we're going to get probably not too many cards, but definitely a few. And we're going to likely get one mechanic at least, right? If there is one, or at least one theme. And we'll have some stuff to talk about in the next Lightforge. So for this Lightforge, I kind of wanted to dig deep into something we haven't been doing because of this event, which is deep fried meta. Don't worry, guys. If you missed Deep Fried Meta, it's back. And it's where we teach you some of the fundamentals of Hearthstone Arena that kind of remains true no matter what Blizzard does to it. It's just a limited format thing, right? Or a deck building thing.
Yep.
And
So this week, did you have more of a?
no, that's it. Go for it.
This week we want to talk about aggro, mostly because of a few things. Number one, I play aggro a lot. It's a format that I enjoy. It's a style that I enjoy. But I have a lot of people in stream ask me, Merps, I can't get myself to play aggro effectively. How do you do it, right? How do you just approach aggro? Because it is just more than draft small things and go face. It's a lot more than that. And I know we meme and we make fun of that, and Smork and all of that stuff, but aggro requires a lot of cohesiveness. It requires you to go in with a specific game plan and implement that game plan, and anything you do that deviates from it a little bit can really just affect your win rate significantly. So I want to basically explain today, number one, just what is aggro, right? What is aggro? General principles of aggro. And then I want to talk about how do you draft aggro.
Mm-hmm. I
And
think
then
that's
how do
very
you,
important, how to draft
right,
aggro, because so many times, and I've learned a little more, but so many times I've tried to draft aggro and it just doesn't really work out that way. And that's
yeah,
because I think I try to draft aggro wrong. And it's fine if it doesn't work out, you just kind of have a different deck. But if you're trying to draft aggro, there is definitely a certain specific way to do it.
yes. So, we're going to talk about general principles, how do you draft aggro, and then how do you play aggro. Now, the context of all of these is going to be things that hold true for basically all the classes or all the aggressive classes, right?
What are the
And you can,
non-aggressive classes, Merps?
well, I mean, we joke about aggro priest, but let's just say, priest is one of those classes that is heavily dis, or
That was not a
heavily,
joke for like a good like 6 months to a year in
yeah, yeah.
Hearthstone history in the arena.
But if you look at the cards, for example, that Priest has, a lot of their heavy hitters come very late in the game. A lot of the cards are very value oriented. A lot of their cards favor them sort of being on the board. Their hero power favors them being on the board
Hmm.
and just trading on the board, right? If you go
So,
face, you
so
can't really
there's a
use hero power.
difference between aggro and zoo. And I think that's something that we need to identify kind of right off the bat because both aggro and zoo involves you being on the board. So a lot of players just kind of equate them. But zoo means you're buffing the stuff on the board and you're actually doing a lot of trading, like
Mhm.
especially in arena. It means the difference between what we normally consider aggro and we consider more of like a mid-range or just like on the board kind of play, right? Like when you say paladins are aggro, no, there's two kinds of paladins. There's the aggressive ones that go face and hit you with vine cleaver to the face 3 times and win, and buff stuff that they have. And then there's the kind that just keeps trading to try to preserve stuff on the board so that they can steed up and then win later on like whatever else paladins have. And that's very, very different. So when we talk about aggro today, we're going to focus on aggression, like actually hitting
Right.
your face, not what priest does, which there is, and these days it's better and better than control priest. It's you get on the board and then you trade a lot, right? Warlock does this a lot too. You get on the board a lot very quickly, using up some resources, and then you trade. Why? Because the instant you stop trading, if your opponent can wipe your board and then hit your face, you're dead as a warlock. So
Right. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of equating zoo with aggro because so the first step of aggro and zoo is both tempo out, right?
mm-hmm.
But where they go after they initially tempo out is very different. Zoo turns tempo into value.
Yeah.
And aggro turns tempo into face damage.
Yes.
So and it's not always as simple as that, right? Do you trade as aggro? Yeah, some, like, when it's necessary, when it's appropriate, and we can talk about when it is appropriate later. But people look at the first step of that, it's like, oh, like, you play a flame imp into a dire wolf, versus you play I don't know, some other one drop into like a Murloc Tidehunter, and they're like, it's like pretty similar. And it is, but it's just the next step. What you do with that tempo that really differentiates those two.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, good. It's good to establish that because I do think that is one thing people tend to confuse. So, okay, we're doing aggro. Let's talk about general principles. So, first of all, what is aggro, right? Like,
Can I say
what?
one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
So there's no class that can't be aggro except priest. And I'm not saying priest can't be aggro, but it's like really hard to make priest aggro.
It's really hard.
On the other hand, you can, as warlock, not play zoo and play aggro if you have a lot of reach cards, and because you do get to tempo out quicker than other classes. You can obviously deal with anything with a hero power that deals damage to the opponent's face, whether it's druid, rogue, mage, or hunter, and you can do it with anything that puts stuff on the board, whether it's paladin or shaman. So you're kind of covering all your bases. The one class that doesn't fall into that is so warlock and warrior don't quite, and priest don't quite fall into that. But warlock can tempo out faster than other classes, and warriors have the best reach in the game if you can get through taunts. So they can both also be played in an aggressive style. So priest is really the only odd one out.
Yeah, right. These days, priest is truly the only one that can't. And mage has been one of those classes that it's like very meta dependent, right? You really need to see sort of like which cards they're getting a lot, and these days they're getting a ton of pyroblasts.
Well, I think after the bucket system comes in, you don't even need, like, you can always make yourself get the cards. Like, it may not be the
Okay,
favorite archetype, but you can do it, right? Whereas priest, like, what are you
right.
gonna do? What are you picking for aggro, right? Like, you have your Northshire cleric, and then your, I don't know, your 2-drop that buff stuff, and
Just
then
hope you get the crappy buckets a lot and then quadruple mind blast.
Yeah, right. Like it's not the same.
It's like, oh man, I hope I get the worst bucket. Yeah, it's really not. It's not the same. And your hero power is so tilted towards like on the board control,
Yeah.
right? But anyways, we talked about Priest a lot. Priest is not what we're going to be talking about today. So that's all we're going to talk about when it comes with Priest.
This is what happens when Collins is no longer on the Lightforge.
I know. All right. So look, what is aggro, right? Like you guys know that we got to put stuff out there. At some point, we're going to be hitting face a lot. Aggro games typically, okay, so if you play aggro, the game will be decided by turn 7, one way or the other.
Definitely by turn 7. Usually before that.
Exactly. What I mean is by turn 7.
Absolutely. Like it does not go farther than that. Yeah.
Yeah, the game has been decided. Like, and I would say like 90% of cases where you're going to lose or you are heavily going to win, right? Unless something dramatic happens, like you either top deck like a god after that, assuming you even have cards that are applicable in that case, or they do the whole like spreading plague into primordial drake into heal into all of that.
So I was about to say, so let's pause there for a second, right? Like game is over essentially by turn 7. Let's be conservative and say it's your opponent's turn 7, so they get up to 7 mana's worth of stuff before you know whether you can finish them off or not. So cards that don't affect aggro, and this is very important because warlocks are dominating the meta right now, is Voidlord. That is not a card that stops aggro. Like, if you get to the point where you're like, oh no, he dropped the Voidlord, my aggro strategy didn't work. No, your aggro strategy died before the Voidlord came out. You expect the Voidlord to come out. Like, because it didn't have to be a Voidlord. It could be like any combination of taunts or heals, and you were dead. And your opponent has like, I don't know, like an 80-90% chance of having some combination of taunts and heals in their hand that they can play later on when they can play 10 tons of manas of cards or draw into their outs. So if your aggro strategy is dying to a Voidlord, it's failed before that. And the other thing, which you've mentioned with Spreading Plague, is, so what are you worried about? You are worried about Blizzard. Why? Because it freezes you and then prevents a face damage for 1 turn. So even if it's not wiping your board, it's making you get closer and closer to that, like, oh, it's turn 8 now, I didn't win yet. Whoops. Like, now my chance to win is very low. Spreading Plague, same deal. You got to spread out as aggro to some extent, and Spreading Plague punishes that really hard, even harder than Blizzard, because you usually need more than 1 turn of damage to get through it. And Steed is the other punish. So 1, the mage punishes you no matter what happens. The Spreading Plague punish involves you spreading on the board. So if you can somehow manage to not do that against Druid, you're in better shape. The final one was Steed. Steed requires the Paladin to have something on the board. So kind of a problem, right? Because if you're aggro, you need to go face and not trade. But if you need to keep the Paladin off the board, you need to trade. So you're always in this decision point where you have to figure out whether you let the Paladin buff or not. And if you let the Paladin...
Okay, we're getting to, like, remember, this is general principles here. Like...
Okay.
This is kind of like...
I'm trying to go... I'm going into what it means, like, to win by turn 7, right?
Right. And that's fine. I think we should just stick with general principles for now. Because, like, we're going to talk later on about what it means in order to, like, win by turn 7. But let's just generally lay out what is aggro. Like, we don't need to talk about specific cards right now.
Okay.
All right. So the game is always decided by turn 7. Number 1, one way or the other. Number 2, another like just rule of aggro. You as the aggro will always be putting out more stuff on the board than your opponent. That's just it. Like, you are going to be converting more of your mana into stuff, stats, removals, than your opponent. So on average, they're going to skip or hang mana more than you. On average, you are going to be over sort of statted on the board. You're going to try to put out like all of these powerful minions.
Okay,
So that's a
I'm
general.
gonna go one more step than you here. It's not just mana. You're using all sorts of resources to put tempo out. You're using your face if you're a warlock and taking damage to play a flame imp, or if you're any class and you take weapons. That's trading your face resource in order to get extra tempo. Because why is a fiery Oryx able to deal 6 damage, whereas a 3 mana spell that deals 6 damage would be ridiculous, right? I mean, Fireball's ridiculous and that's 4 mana. It's because you take some face damage. You're able to convert cards into tempo, not just the obvious way of like I soul fire and so I had to discard a card, so I've traded as a card for tempo, but also in the if I'm playing 2 cards instead of 1, I'm getting more tempo on the board than if I spent the same amount of mana I just played 1 card. There's a rule in Hearthstone where on average somewhere between half a mana's worth of tempo and a full mana's worth of tempo is banked into each card. That is the value of the card. That is a fundamental like game design principle of Hearthstone, and it allows any class that uses their cards like more to be able to tempo out a little bit faster. So especially and the rogue combo mechanic kind of doubles that. So if you're a rogue, that's definitely like the thing to do. But even with other classes, if you're playing two mana cards on turn 4, for example, you're tempo out harder than someone that plays a Yeti. Assuming your 2 mana cards are as tempoed as Yeti on average.
Yep. So another sort of general principle or of aggro, and this is something that, and because this is a general principle, it kind of turns some people away from aggro, or it makes it a very daunting sort of play style. You will be going, what I'll say, all in, a relatively uncomfortable amount for some people, right? And I think, for those of you who have played, poker before, I think a good analogy is sometimes it feels like playing aggro is like you playing short stacked, It's like you have turns to make your move, but you don't have that many turns, right? Like you don't have the opportunity to just wait it out, to be like, oh, I don't have the perfect read yet, but I have all these things I can do. I can just kind of, in these control versus control games, with aggro, look, you are going to be playing the odds a decent amount. You are going to have to sort of be comfortable with the unknowns. You're going to have to be playing percentages a decent amount. And that's a general principle of aggro that we should lay out there. Number one, just so it gets you in that mindset. And number two, it gets you into thinking, it's like, well, do I want to play aggro? Right. Because that's just something you have to really, really like commit to if you do want to play aggro.
Aggro is risk, always risk. And it's the evaluation of risk on each turn of whether you attack face or not. It's the evaluation of risk of whether you use a resource right now or you wait for the next turn. Like aggro is the kind of deck where you're sitting there on a deadly shot and you have plays to make, but you may just use the deadly shot anyway if you want that tempo right now where it's more important and you need to translate it to face damage. So one thing with aggro when you're talking about risk is you always have to evaluate risk like 2 turns, 3 turns ahead when you're deciding what to play. And you have to evaluate that risk very, very precisely. Because if you're not evaluating that risk very precisely, then a lot of things can happen. If you play a more control kind of game, or especially a mid-range kind of game, your choices are very simple. Right? Your chances in which going face is the right move is so low that in like 90% of your plays, you would be doing some sort of trading or just like playing the cards that you can play or like using the hero power and like using the rest of your mana in some way efficiently. It's easy to play every other archetype in these early turns. It is very hard to play aggro in these early turns. And we can talk about the mulligan later. That's also like, that's kind of hard in all archetypes, but it's like absolutely like vital in aggro. And also we'll talk about going first and going second. But the point I want to make here is that it is much more risk evaluation than any other class. Like, you're not going to get to any other playstyle. You're not going to get to the same level of risk evaluation skill that's needed to play until you get to like pure control. In which case you have even more risk because now like you have to do it over many turns, over many more turns. So what Merp says about the aggro, like you feel like you're short stacked and you need to make your move in a couple of turns. It's because you don't have the inevitability, right? Like one class, in any matchup, one person always has the inevitability. The other person needs to win before that. As aggro, you never have the inevitability, so you can be safe in your strategy, but your strategy involves knowing when to take that risk.
Right.
And also knowing that sometimes you will just lose. Because no matter what risk you take, it's just not going to work out because the opponent actually can hard counter your deck. Same with control, right? Your opponent can hard counter your deck. It's really kind of hard to hard counter a mid-range deck.
Right. So part of the reason that some people don't like aggro is sometimes it feels as though there was nothing you could do.
There's
right?
more. That happens more often than if you play mid-range. It's true.
Yes. But also, so let's look at what we've talked about so far, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the game is decided.
Before we go there, I do want to address a point about people who are like feel like aggro, you have less control. You also have less control in control, but for some reason, people don't feel that way. Like it feels like, oh no, I just got rushed down. Well, you just got rushed down means you didn't have control over winning the game or not. But somehow it didn't count when you're playing control. Whereas if you're playing aggro and it's like, oh, the opponent played a bunch of taunts, what was I going to do? It just feels worse. I don't know. It feels the same to me. It doesn't feel any better or worse to me.
Right,
but I think for most people, it feels worse.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it does feel worse. Also, just because you don't have as many turns to sort of like do
lose. To sort of like you get to lose quicker rather than dragging out your eventual painful death as control if you were going to lose the game anyway.
No, but it's about how people feel, right?
Okay.
So like once again, you and I agree. It's like whether the game is decided and you just like drag on the game for 10 more turns, or it was just decided very early on. Like it doesn't make that like. It doesn't make a difference in terms of
win rate,
the actual game, but it makes a huge difference on how people perceive
the psychological part of it.
Yeah,
okay.
Okay, so what does this mean for aggro, right? Like when the game is decided by turn 7, you're always looking at tempo. You're looking at these things that, these small things that make a huge difference, and you're going all in a decent amount. It means aggro is really hard to play. Aggro is a style that, because for some people who come from constructed, and especially maybe like 2 years ago when Face Hunter was,
aggro was the easiest to play ever.
Yes, it was the easiest to play, and it was very cheap. So some people take that attitude into the arena, and they ended up being very confused. It's like, wait, why don't I get this? I should get this because aggro is easy.
This is limited. Aggro is hard. Control is hard. Mid-range is easy.
Mid-range is easy. So if you are a player who is, just coming back or, just starting the game, play the mid-range game, right? Like, just and learn how the game works. You play aggro when you know how the game works. You know the cards, you know the meta, and then you exploit that, right? You use that knowledge to your advantage. That's when you play aggro. So I just want to establish right off the bat that it's like, okay, it's all of these things put together, and it makes it really, really tough to play aggro. So let's talk about how to play aggro now.
Okay, well, let's go into one of the most difficult play styles to play.
Okay, exactly. So, all right, let's talk about how to draft aggro, right? Especially now, drafting is important. We have all these bucket systems now. But I do want to talk about just like, so how do you want to approach the draft? What do you want to look out for? And I have a few points that hold true whether or not you're playing Hunter, obviously, very able to go aggro, or, if you want to play more of a aggro paladin or aggro rogue, we're playing rogue today, right? So we can also get that in a little bit. But right off the bat, this is the easiest point of all. You need early drops. You need 1 drops. Okay, like you being able to use up your turn 1 is essential. As aggro, every single time you use mana and your opponent doesn't, or every single time you don't use mana, that is a huge deal, because remember, the game is over by turn 7. So the total amount of mana that is used this game is not a lot. So whatever advantage you have, it's magnified in terms of the entire game. Or whatever mana that you don't use, that's a huge advantage for your opponent, right? And that is a snowball that starts one turn later. And remember, turn 7. So like you just basically wasted 1/7 of the entire game. So you need 1-drops, even if they're not so great. Like I go down in value quite often just to take, just a bunch of like middling 1-drops. So make sure you do that, prioritize that. You need 2-drops, you need 3-drops. You just need early game plays, period.
Yep. So I'm going to jump in. I don't have really much to say about that, because I just totally agree with everything you said there. But I want to talk about the difference between going first and going second. All right, is that on your to talk about list for later, or can I interject
no,
it
talk
here?
about it now. Talk about it now.
Because I think it really affects the concept of using every mana, right? So fundamentally, people always think it's better to go first, especially if you're aggro, because you are the person with more mana, right? Like Merp says, every turn you don't use a mana, like every turn your opponent does, you're behind. And what does aggro have? What does going first have? It has like one more mana than your opponent, or like I guess a half more mana than your opponent every one your turn, one your opponent's turn. And that kind of adds up no matter how you look at it, even though your opponent has the coin, which allows them to swing for 1 turn. Your opponent, like player 2, also has a card, but that matters a little less for aggro. So looking into this concept of every single mana is like twice as important for aggro as for a mid-range deck, at least. Going as player 1 gives you 7 half manas or 3.5 mana spread over your 7 turns that matter. Whereas going second gives you 3.5 less mana, but you get a coin. So the total difference is 2.5 mana. That's what player 1 gets. What does player 2 get? Player 2 gets a card, which means that they can extend the game for let's just say 1 more turn. It's not even really 1 more turn. It's maybe like a half more turn. So if you're player 2, you may have like 7.5 turns, and if you're player 1, you have like almost 7 turns, right? In reality, I think you always have about 7 turns. So player 1 has like 7 turns, player 2 has like almost 8 turns. Or before like they actually like run out of stuff. And that's very important when you play. It's less important when you draft, because you're gonna draft aggro cards. Yeah. But when you play as player 1, know that you're on a shorter clock than as player 2. You don't have that extra card, and you really have to take advantage of your mana. You are advantaged, but as player 2, don't just think, oh, I'm not advantaged at all. Your game could be a little longer, which means you're a little less desperate. Not a lot less desperate, but you're like 15% less desperate.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's good. And we are going to talk about, how do you play aggro, but I think that's good to put in here, right? Because it really does go with the sort of early game 1-drops and 2-drops. Okay. Next thing, that you want to keep in mind whenever you're drafting aggro is you need to know your class cards and what's prevalent. So for example, if you're playing Hunter, recognize that Hunters have a lot of good 3-mana cards. It's just something that they have, right? Between Deadly Shot, Animal Companion, Eaglehorn Bow, just a lot of their good cards are at 3 mana. Now, you still need 3 drops, but with aggro, a lot of times you just need to make sure you're using up your mana, period, right? So one of the problems that we have with Hunter is that 3 is like one of those awkward like mana costs in which you obviously can't play on turn 1 or turn 2. On turn 4, you have to pair it with like a 1 mana card if you want to use all of your mana, which is sort of hit or miss. And on turn 5, you can play a 3 and a 2, but it's like you can sort of see the awkwardness there. So that's something when I play Hunter, I always keep in mind. I'm like, I'm going to get a lot of good 3-mana cards. And because I'm always aware of the fact that I want to spend mana, like if there are two cards that are relatively the same and one is not 3 cost, it's like 2 cost or 4 cost. Especially as Hunter, you don't have that many good things that cost 4 mana.
It's terrible.
Right. And this is also why when they were given Flanking Strike, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's amazing, right? It's a super premium card at 4. If you're faced with, let's say, Hildnir Frost Rider versus Fire Plume Phoenix, right? Fire Plume Phoenix is really good. And look, it also depends on the curve, whatever your draft up to that point. But you need to know sort of the class cards and how your class curves out, right? If you want to play aggressive Druid, you have to know that they have a lot of good 2-drops, which is great, right? That's good. But you have to keep that in mind as you draft. Because one of the things about aggro is like your deck has to be more cohesive in your sort of mission than control decks. Control decks, like they just have
I think I'm just going to make it simpler for our listeners, because what you're saying is absolutely true. In this meta, nobody has good 4-drops.
No.
So just know that you're going to need some 4-drops, period. And you can't, and what you're really thinking about is not necessarily, how do I get my good 4-drops? Do I have to go down in 4-drops? But also, am I drafting in a way where I have so many 2s that they count as 4-drops? Or am I drafting in a way where I don't have a lot of 2s and I'm looking to 1-3-3 on coin? These are the choices that you're really going to be making, when you're setting up your deck. You can have a mix of the 2 or whatever, but if you have a low enough curve, you don't need 4-drops, right? You don't need the 4 that you normally would need.
Yep. So, once again, something that makes aggro a hard sort of play style is you have to have the knowledge, right? You have to know the class before you draft it. Because if you just go in haphazardly say, yeah, I'm going to play aggro, and pick cards that you think are aggressive, but end up with a wonky curve, that's the worst kind of deck of all. A failed aggro deck is the worst kind of deck. That is just, you are not going to win anything with that. So
I think I got to maybe 5 or maybe even 6 wins with a failed Hunter deck that had 3 2-drops and maybe 3 1-drops. And then maybe 3 3-drops. So you're not gonna totally fail, but it definitely was not fun to play. It was like I felt the pain. And that brings me to another point on Hunter specific, or really any class. But Rogue can hero power on 2. Paladin is kind of fine hero powering on 2. If you have a class that can't really hero power on 2 and have it work tempo wise, including Hunter, and we took every 2-drop we were offered. In this meta, and by this meta, I mean any meta in the last 9 months, there hasn't been a lot of 2s, right? So in drafting, you really have to the bucket system made it a little bit better, but you're not in the clear. And Hunter, I think, suffers the most from this. This is one of the things that holds aggro Hunters back, which is that a lot of the Hunters 2-drops are traps, and that's not very good for tempo. They're good cards, but you don't want to take them. They don't fit your archetype. But you don't get enough actual 2-mana minions to make that curve happen. You do get a lot of 3-mana minions. So you almost have to, and this is a weird thing to say, right? Especially when we're talking about an aggro deck. But I've done this with more success than I've actually drafted fully aggro Hunters. Where I have my 1-drops, and then I assume I'm going to hero power on turn 2. Even though I'm a Hunter, and turn 2 has nothing for me. So it evens out what I'm doing between player 1 and player 2. In that tempo-wise, player 1 just loses 2 mana there, and boom, I'm basically player 2 at that point. And player 2, on the other hand, gets perfect mana curve because I have a ton of 1-drops, and I can coin out my 3-drops because I have 3-drops. So it's something that I found brings a bit more consistency to it, and that's not to say that that's the best way to play aggro. It's more in Hunter particularly at this time, it's kind of a crappy time to find your curve. So if you're not getting a lot of 2s in the first half of your draft, this is something that you may have to really look into, because you don't want to aggro Hunter, or you can just not be aggro if you can still switch out of it. But you don't want an aggro deck that doesn't have a very good curve.
Yep. That's just true. If you don't have a good curve, and your aggro, you really cannot expect that many wins. So, all right. Next, when you're drafting aggro, okay. So there's two parts to this, and the first part I think everyone will understand. Look, you want to prioritize removals, especially hard removals, right? Because especially like right now, we're in a meta in which, man, you got to prepare for that Witchwood Grizzly on turn 5, right?
Or
And
the
that Witchwood
rotten
Grizzly
apple bomb that is our card good bad.
or Rotten Apple Bomb, like you need to prioritize removals because of all those like taunts, but up to a point. Because you're an aggro deck, you need to make sure that once again, we're talking about cohesiveness. We're talking about fine-tuning the deck. I think like if you as an aggro deck just see removals as good, be like, oh, I got to remove all of these taunts, which is true, but then you take too many of them, and some cards in your hand are just there for like 2 to 3 turns and have
This is
no
what I'm
use,
saying. This happens to me
right?
so often, and then I'm like, all right, I'm just a crappy control deck now. I'm just a control deck with no card draw and no inevitability.
Right. So if you as an aggro deck have too many removals in hand and like 1 or 2 cards basically see no use for 2 to 3 turns, once again, 7-turn clock, right? Basically half the game you have had these 1 or 2 cards, which, let's face it, is like half of your hand at some point, have no use, right? And when it could have been just a Yeti and you put it down and it gets a consistent 4 damage to the face every single turn, or just a Bloodfen Raptor and it starts to snowball, right? So you want to make sure you have a decent amount of these removals, so you can draw them, use them, but not have them clog up your hand.
Yeah, so let me explain it one step, like just turn, because when you're thinking aggro, it's not like you just turn everything into tempo and you're done. That's what happens when you're thinking zoo. When you're thinking aggro, you have to turn everything one step further, right, into face damage. So think about the difference between a Raptor on turn 2, and then you just keep trading your other stuff for like the rest of the game, right? You just got like 15 damage out of the Raptor, like easy, before they board clear you or something. Now, what would happen if you like miss the Raptor or like play a 2/2? Let's say you don't even miss your turn 2. Let's say you even have it. It's just a crappy card. It's a 2/2, let's say. Well, now you've missed still like 4 damage to the opponent's face. And what have you gained besides an unplayable card? Even when the time you play it, they have seen more cards, which means they have seen more of their taunts, which means your chances of translating your minion's damage into face damage goes down every single turn. So it's not just that your card is worthless for a couple turns, and that obviously hurts, but even when it's worth something, it's suckier.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. All right, and something else you want to keep in mind as you draft aggro, and once again, this is true just generally across like different classes when you draft aggro. So 2 things that you can put into one point. Remember that as aggro, you dictate sort of like what happens on the board, right? Because you should be the person who has put out stuff earlier and put out more stuff generally. So what you want to do is you want to follow that up with creatures that create problems for your opponent. And 2 good examples are Eggnapper and Cursed Disciple. You know, like these are cards that, all right, let's face it, Eggnapper is just a good card, right? But when you're aggro,
it is the best card.
It is like the best card. Same thing with Cursed Disciple, right? Like
if you're aggro, I've sat there with these decisions where I'm like Eggnapper or Basilisk, and it's like Eggnapper.
Oh, definitely.
Sure, Basilisk is one of the highest rated cards in the game on our tier list, but like, who cares? It's dealing 1 damage face and you're aggro.
So it's interesting that you bring up Basilisk, because the last section after, right now we're talking about how do you draft, and then we talk about how do you play. The last section is sort of like traps.
Like, Basilisk, huge trap aggro.
Basilisk is a huge trap.
You're like, oh, I need 3 drops. I need good 3 drops. Basilisk is the best 3 drop. All true, but that's a zoo way of thinking. That's not an aggro way of thinking.
And look, for those of you who aren't just going to stick around the entire time, I don't want you to go away right now thinking it's like, got it, never draft Basilisk. No, 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 no. But we'll address that a little bit later on. So look, when you're aggro, remember that you are able to dictate what happens on the board. So you eliminate the downside of things like an Egg Napper or a Cursed Disciple, right? What are you afraid of when you play this stuff? That they have lots of small stuff, right? That they have like the double Fireflies plus a Pain, which completely counters your Egg Napper, right? Or they just have like, you know, some small stuff and they just bump two of them into your Cursed Disciple. That is your fear. Or like normally what your fear is just like, oh, well, like it's just 2 hero powers to kill off the Cursed Disciple. Well, they can't hero power twice in 1 turn, typically, right? And remember, it's 7 turns. If we're talking about them pinging it over 2 turns, 1/3 of the game is already gone, dead. And you've gotten damage in.
They're dead if they ping it over dead. 2 turns.
Right. So when you know this, right, a lot of these minions that you typically are like, yeah, it's good, but you know, I wouldn't pick it for this or that reason. And I think that's more so like Cursed Disciple than Egg Napper, right? Like, once again, just recognize the fact that the game is only going to last 7 turns, and these cards that you can protect, when you can dictate the trades on the board or just how the board sort of operates, they become really, really good. Okay. So those are sort of my general principles for like things that you want to remember as you draft aggro. Do you have any that pop up in your head right now?
No. What if I'm actually drafting aggro? I think part of the thing is like start drafting aggro, but don't like if you see a card that's heavily under bucketed or something, maybe don't do aggro this game if it's like a less aggro card. Like you don't have to start with this from pick 1, right? Like if you're given a choice between relatively equal cards, take the aggro card, do that for a bit, and then like shift away from it if you need to, right? Like you don't have to, in terms of drafting, you don't have to go hard down one lane. You want to set it up so that you can get the most value if you go down this lane. But like be flexible enough, especially around pick like 10 to like 15, to like switch back into mid-range or zoo if you need to.
Yep.
That's that's one of the good things about drafting aggro, because what you're taking is like a lot of like curve cards and stuff, and so that's good for a zoo archetype too. You have like a good backup archetype. And if you remember from before the bucketing thing came out, we were always like, just always draft mid-range. You will sometimes be forced into like aggro or be forced into control, but you should always try to draft mid-range, because if you try to draft aggro, you will just lose like 25% of the times with a really crappy deck. And same with control. But that's no longer the case in the bucketing system. You can start out drafting aggro, but that doesn't mean you just like are not flexible at all. Like now it's kind of reversed, right? Like no matter what you're drafting for, be ready to shift into something else if your synergies trigger and things like that. So yeah, that's all for drafting.
All right. Now let's talk about how do you play aggro. And once again, you know, I'm going to use Hunter as an example sometimes, but we want to give you basic principles about how do you play aggro in a game setting that is just applicable to all classes. And all right, so let's get started with something simple that ties into the first point of how do you draft aggro, which is just you want to use all of your mana, right? Simple enough. You want to make sure you are using mana, and not only for this turn, for next turn as well.
And your mana does not count your hero power, because that is anti-tempo for everybody besides Rogue.
Yes. Now, once again, you know, as we keep on going down the turns, like if we're going into like turn 6 or turn 7 and you're Hunter, maybe you do want to use the hero power then, right? But what
we're talking about early turns, yeah.
Yeah, during the early turns, you want to use your mana to further the board, either by you building a board or removing their stuff so you could go face, right? So you want to use up all of your mana, and you want to use up your mana to basically put out more stuff than your opponent. That's just generally your goal. So also when you play aggro, just you have to be focused all the time. Remember, seemingly small decisions matter big time. Huge. So
You have fewer decisions to make and fewer
mhm.
turns in which you have to make decisions. So they all matter more.
The amount of times in which I have played as a hunter, I have gotten candle shot turn one, I equip it, and I spend 30 seconds thinking whether or not to swing face on turn one, and then the chat just like laughs at me and is like, "What the hell are you doing?"
No, that you
These are
okay,
yeah,
especially
these
as
are decisions
hunter.
that you have to make.
Of the games you lose, like of the game I lose as hunter when I'm playing, like when I'm not playing my patented control hunter, um, really half the games I lose is by one turn.
Hmm.
It's like if literally I don't die this turn, I win, and then I die. And I'm like, ah, oh, what that means is if I got 2 more damage in the turn before, like, and sometime in these 7 turns or whatever, I would have won.
Yeah. So know that small decisions matter big time. So whenever you are thinking about sort of like, do I trade or not trade? Do I pre-hit,
Yeah.
right? Or not pre-hit? Just know that you have to be really tuned in. Aggro is not something that you watch Netflix and play,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's like you can do that with control and
no, you could do that
like,
with control. That's why you play control. It's because you have the inevitability. Like, think about the decision an aggro makes on whether to hit face or not. Think about what the counterplay is from control side. The answer is nothing. Like, this is what it means, like, if you're aggro and you get stopped by control, you're like, oh, I couldn't do anything. Like, you know, in the games in which you don't lose by just one turn, yeah, you're probably right. You probably couldn't have done anything. But as control, you can't do anything either. Why? Because you're not even given these decisions to make in the early game. Like, what do you do when the hunter hits you to the face with a candle shot on turn one? Obviously nothing. And what do you do if they don't choose to do that? Obviously nothing. Your play does not change, right? Like, there's no counterplay, there's no interaction here. And so, like, yeah, you can go watch Netflix and play Control, and that's gonna get you a lot farther than if you watch Netflix and play
it's a
aggro.
lot less game
Yeah.
influencing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's not to say, like, you would be better watching Netflix than if you were concentrating on Control, but, like, if you're good at the game, it's easier to play Control on a turn-by-turn basis, right? You have more decisions to make over the course of the entire game. So, you know, I'm definitely not saying Control is easier than aggro. I think Control is harder than aggro on an overall basis, but on a turn-by-turn basis, aggro is harder.
Yeah. And it's just because you only have those 7 turns, right? Remember, 7 turns. That's it. The game is decided. You might not lose, or like, you might not get lethal by then, and you might not lose if you're behind, but the game has already been decided.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So, okay. We know that small decisions matter big time. So also, what does that lead to? It means you need to make your reads very early on, right? Like, you need to be focused. Start making your reads early. And here's why I said aggro is difficult. You got to make sure your reads are correct. Like, you got to stay focused, make your reads early. And oh man, once again, if you make a wrong read, extremely
No,
punishing.
if you make a wrong read, you lose.
Yeah,
like a wrong read is worse than no read because you are aggro, right? Your whole point is how can I take risks? Where can I take risks? I need to take X percent amount value of risk, or else I don't win the game. So where am I doing that? And so if you're wrong, you've taken a risk, right? You get punished if you're wrong. But you have to. You can't just be like, oh, I'm not sure. I'm not going to take the risk, because then you just lose because you don't have the inevitability, right? Your opponent always has the inevitability. So make a lot of reads. You have to make a lot of reads, and your reads all have to be right. No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Look, we're all, constantly trying to get better. And then, sometimes you just play to build up a skill. Like, generally, you guys always should be building up your skill of making reads. But aggro is when you really test them, right? That's when you really test your reads, and you also just it forces you to stay focused, and it forces you to just really make the correct.
So if you're like failing a lot on an aggro and you think you have decent aggro decks, like ask yourself, when I'm not playing aggro and I'm making the reads, am I making a lot of reads? What % chance are they wrong? And if you're like, well, they're wrong like 10% of the time, and I'm making like one read every 2 turns, you can't play aggro. Like you're just gonna lose a lot as aggro. Like at that point, you need your reads aren't good enough to be as effective in aggro as they are in mid range.
Yep.
And on the flip side, this is like the tricky side. If you're playing control or like a slower mid range deck, and you're like up in the higher win rates, and you're facing a deck that is like pretty obviously aggro, you can bait them. You can bait them into making a misread because they're probably only that high because they are at least pretty good at making reads. And so you can do something like play a slightly inefficient turn and make them think, oh, if he had X card, he would have. And then you actually have the card. And then you punish them afterwards and then you secure your victory. It's a little risky, but if you're control, you don't have a lot of opportunities to take risk. And if you're facing aggro, you don't want a successful aggro player with a good aggro deck to be the one that's completely determining like risk. Because that's when they're going to win, right? So control versus aggro is a terrible matchup in the arena for the control player because that's one of the reasons why like aggro wins. That's one of the like if you're a slower deck, aggro is going to destroy you. So anytime you have of putting risk on yourself rather than letting the aggro player take the risks, you do it. Like so much baiting needs to happen if you have a control deck that is just like I draw some cards, I will value you at some point.
Yep. All right. So we know now that small decisions matter, so you have to make reads, right? And you have to make sure that they're correct. Now, what does that lead to, right? That leads to the most important question of all, because now that we're talking about making reads and we're talking about, all right, what can happen on the next turn? The most important question is a question that I find a lot of people don't ask. Whenever I do any sort of co-op or coaching, and that question is, does this result matter? Everyone who plays the game and, tryhards to some extent will ask themselves the question, what can happen in the next turn, right? And then a lot of them just stop the analysis right there. So, going into turn 4, they're like, okay, they can Blessing of Kings, so I need to get rid of this. Yeah. And then, when you're aggro, the question that you always have to ask is, do I care if they do
what
this?
% chance do I care that they do this?
Right. So, look, if it's Steed, you care a ton, right? You care so much about Steed. If it's Blessing of Kings and, they get like a good value trade on you, a lot of times you don't care, right? Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't really stop you. Keep something on their board. Yes, it's powerful, but a lot of times, that 4 extra face damage is more worth it than the risk of Blessing of Kings coming down on their minion and really not doing too much to you, right?
Blessing of Kings gives them 4 extra health on that minion for 4 mana. How is that bad for you? Like, you don't care about the attack on that minion. You're not putting things that are gigantic down probably, or to the extent that you may have wanted to, you probably have another option that's almost just as efficient with like 2 smaller cards because you're an aggro deck. And remember what I said about as aggro, you have to do that one more conversion step when you're thinking about tempo. You don't think, what is the best play for tempo? That's not your thinking all the time. Your thinking is, what is the best play for face damage? Which involves tempo, to be fair. But worrying about something like Blessing of Kings is worrying about the tempo part at the expense of the face damage part, which you cannot do. Because if the opponent gains, like let's say, 2 tempo from getting a good trade on you on this turn and then trading up on the next turn, right? 2 tempo loss. That's a pretty big deal in the tempo game. But over 2 turns, that 2 tempo loss, if you can get an extra 4 face damage in, will you trade 1 tempo on the board like 3 turns from now for 2 face damage? Yeah, you would. Because what's 3 turns after turn 4? That's turn 7. Like, you'll trade all your tempo for face damage at that point.
Yep. So, once again, when you're aggro, that is the question you need to ask after every single sort of like turn analysis, right? Because as aggro, a lot of people recognize that they already need to be like, oh man, here's what could happen. This is what can happen. And then recognize which are the ones that are most punishing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that decrease your win percentage by the most, and then you can be like, well, what percent chance is that going to happen,
Yeah.
right? Based on my reads, just based generally, and then you can make your play from there.
Yeah.
So
And I'm going to take a step back into how Hearthstone was designed, right? And we do a lot of this when we're doing the algorithm for Hearthstone. Cards are not just designed like willy-nilly, right? Like they're designed, and then they're I don't know. I really don't know if Blizzard has an algorithm for their cards, but even if they don't, they're tested somewhat, and they figure out, like, because people will try to break the game by putting decks together and whatever. And so, especially in something like the core set for Hearthstone, which is basic and classic, it comes out. It's been extensively tested because they've like spent like a year plus testing this stuff, and then they got like, you know, people are good at card games and whatever, so they know the values of this. And what's a 1-mana card that deals face damage? Sinister Strike, right? It's 3 damage. What's a 1-mana card, on the other hand, that purely removes tempo on the board on that turn? It's like Holy Smite, right? And if you can't deal face damage with Holy Smite or Arcane Shot, it'll be even lower value. Now, Sinister Strike's a crappy card. It could probably be deal 4 damage to the face and be like okay, but they didn't want that to happen. Holy Smite is also a crappy card, and you would make it even crappier. So usually, you will end up trading something like, and Holy Smite may cost only 1 mana, but it's 2 tempo because 0 mana cards are worth a tempo. So you're trading something like 1.5 tempo for something like 4 damage. That's the equivalent trade. That's the trade where if you're designing the game as Hearthstone, you say these two are more or less the same thing. Because if we make one more than the other, that gives the edge to aggro, and it doesn't give the edge to wherever, blah, 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 right? To tempo. And these are things that people like think about. Even if they don't think about it like precisely in an algorithm fashion, they at least have like some rough formulas or like ideas in their heads when they're doing this. So you can even just like look at the game of Hearthstone to try to figure out what these things are worth. And they're worth about what we said, right? Like, will you take a 2 tempo loss 3 turns from now for 4 face damage? Yes, always. As an aggro deck, like, assuming that this is happening on turn 3, 4, always.
Yep. I think that's a good analysis. Whenever we do something like this, it's nice to put it into those terms, right? Where you can sort of turn a situation into numbers and just really say that, are you okay giving up that 1 tempo, right?
Yeah.
In order for that face damage.
Yeah.
The more you play aggro, the more you realize at the end of the game, you would do a lot to just get
2 more damage.
A bit more damage. Just a tiny bit more damage. Yeah, like if you just had an extra card that was like 5 mana, deal 2 damage to the face, a lot of aggro decks, by the end of the game, they'd be like, please give me that card.
Yes.
Like if that card could materialize in my hand, I would be so
You remember
happy.
Cobra Shot? 5 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion, deal 3 damage to the opponent's face, and it was like a really crappy card. And then so often, like, we would be like, yeah, let's do it. Why? Because you need this card in your deck at this point.
Yeah. It removes something or, helps chip away at something.
It literally trades 2 damage for 3 more damage to the opponent. No, not even 2. Sorry. 3 extra mana on a normal removal for 3 extra face damage. That's what that card did. And for a hunter, even in the arena, it was like, yeah, that's okay.
Basically. All right. So, yeah, once again, the most important question when you play aggro is, does this matter?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everyone can identify what could happen, or you should be able to. And if you can't, don't play aggro yet, right? Like, you have to know the game before you can play aggro.
I think people in general, for some reason, just like in like life, they don't really care about the doesn't matter part as much as like the identifying all bad possibilities and avoiding it part, right?
Yes.
Because they're not risk neutral, they're risk averse, right? People are generally risk averse. And so if anything like that could have been prevented, like actually like happens and it is negative, well then, you were punished, right? Like that was bad. And, when I'm streaming, this happens in chat all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I was punished in a way that has near zero consequence. So, like, if we were keeping score, a good play I made was plus 100, an okay play I made was plus 20, a misplay I made was like minus 200, this misplay I made was like minus 2. If it was a misplay, more likely it was just I just really didn't care.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
like, if it happens and you're punished, fine, but it's not like did it matter? And the answer is so frequently no. And if you're wondering why when streamers get punished is the answer so frequently no, right? Like, why does it not matter so often? It's because we're not making random misplays for the most part. It's because the parts that we're not covering that ends up being like a misplay or like a punish are parts that are at the end of our list. That's why we forgot about it, right? Or that's why we didn't think about it. It's because we're covering the important parts, and then you get to a certain point, and you're like either like, oh, I'm tired, or like, I forgot my list at that point. But it's not that the list was wrong in order. Or maybe you just run out of time, right? Like, these things happen. But it all comes back to this whole idea of, does it matter? And the answer may not be. It's not like a yes or no answer. That's something else I want to highlight. It's a what percent does it matter? Like, is it bad if they have a Blessing of Kings? Probably. It's a really good card if you can play it on turn 4, right? Like, let's be real here. But it may only matter like 5 value points if you're an aggressive deck. Whereas if you're a tempo deck, it would value like 200 tempo points, like value points. And so how much you care about them doing that changes a ton.
Yep. Good.
Oh, do you have any more to do, or can I ask hard questions now?
You can ask hard questions. So the next I want to talk about just sort of traps, yeah, and sort of things that you need to look out for.
Okay, so my question kind of goes to that. So let me ask you a hard question. I'm on the board. My opponent has no minions, or it was like a really good trade and I already took it, and I still have like minions on the board, right? Let's say I have like 1 minion on the board. I'm about to play 2 more, right? And I could play 2 more minions, or I could play 1 minion and hero power. What do I do? It's turn 4 or 5.
Great question. It's something that, and I'm assuming you mean Hunter, right?
No, I mean anything that's aggro.
Sure. Okay. So let's assume it's kind of also a hero power that.
Oh yeah, I assume the hero power is something that does something. Like, it's a paladin, shaman, like hunter, mage, rogue, like, you know, whatever, druid. Like, you're at least getting 1 damage on your opponent's face with that hero power.
Probably. Okay. So I want to distinguish something like rogue and hunter and mage versus something like shaman paladin, which that damage isn't guaranteed, right?
That's fair.
Okay. So let's lump hunter, rogue, mage, and I guess druid, together.
Okay. Lump paladin, shaman together.
Yeah.
And then the rest are not. Don't even bother.
The rest are not, right, because they don't do it. So look, this is when we're talking about sort of like,
or like a priest heal is probably the same as like if you can actually heal a minion is the same as like a, you know, shaman paladin level.
It's like a shaman paladin. Yeah, I think that's fair. So look, if you have that aggressive mindset and you are making that decision, and obviously, look, ADWCTA kept it very sort of vague for reasons, right? And this is where you start to think of all of these factors. Number one, how close are you, right? And how easy is it going to be for you to get that damage? Or really, all of this adds up to how much do I need this extra damage or extra 2 damage right now when you're in the first group, the hunter, rogue, druid, mage category. So when you're really close, you know, you want to think about, well, what can they do in order to come back, right? And how much pressure do I want to put on them? So you want to look at what's in your deck, what's in your hand, sort of how they've played out so far, right? If you're afraid, like, so if your deck doesn't have like 3 kill commands, right, that you can just sort of always point at face, and if you're afraid that it's like, oh man, like they haven't really done much, I think they, you know, they're gonna go sort of, you know, Sunwalker into Furious Etin, into whatever, and you still need the board, you probably play that, right? Like if your deck doesn't have that reach and you're gonna anti-tempo for the hero power, it's probably more worth it for you to just put the extra like two drop onto the board. However, if you do have the reach, but you're not there quite yet, I think that's when it tilts it a little bit into you getting that damage right now, right? The closer you get to just getting that magical number in which you get their HP to 0, the better. And for every turn that you don't hero power and then you push something onto the board, because if they AoE anyways, right? If they need to AoE and then you put something out on the board, you didn't get that hero power in, their AoE not only gets more value, but you missed out on that hero power or that just 2-to-1 damage to the face, right? So once again, ADWCTA presented this question and kept it vague because, there are so many factors. And I think, those are the kind of things that you want to think about here. So how does it change for like the shaman, Paladin kind of thing? It makes it a bit simpler, right? Because in terms of you just want to think about the AoE aspect, because you're never getting that immediate damage to the face. It's more so just about, do I have enough tempo, right? It's never about face damage versus tempo. It's just about,
because at that point you're just saving a card. Like, do I want to save a card so that I could go one further turn before the game has to be decided?
So those are the things you want to think about, and
the
it's
usual answer is no, by the way.
It's tough because I don't want to tell people like exactly sort of like, oh, this is how it usually is. Because,
no, like for Paladin and Shaman, the answer is usually no. The answer for your other like actual damaging the face, it's a little more iffy.
With like mage and with with mage and with druid, it's still probably no, right? With hunter, you're gonna lean more towards hero. It's gonna be a much higher percent chance
because you're getting 2 hero power. You're getting double the value out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And with rogue, you're also leaning more towards it. Just because your mana efficiency for the damage is the same, right? If you're trying to deal if you're trying to turn the rogue hero power into a hunter hero power, you need to hit that button every 2 turns, and you still have a charge left over for tempo. So it's like the best of both worlds. Okay, great. And so I think that also covers like how much you care about getting volcanoed, getting blizzarded, getting spreading plagues, getting insert. The big bad thing there. And the answer is just, how desperate are you, right? How desperate are you for that? How desperate are you for the swing versus the guaranteed damage? Let's put it like that.
Right.
Okay. So how do you value the difference between a removal that can go face versus one that can't? Say, crushing walls versus kill command.
Good point. So what I want, right, in terms of, okay, so if it is a removal that cannot go face at all, right? So kill command is just extremely good because it's able to do whatever you need for it to do, right?
But like crushing walls can't go face, right? Assassinates can't go face.
Can't go face, right?
Saps can't go face.
This is also why, as aggro, it's like, remember 7 turns, and if / when they put out that Witchwood Grizzly, you're still 2 turns away, right? And a lot can happen in 2 turns, aka you lose in 2 turns if you're just waiting for that. So a card like Crushing Walls, I do not put very highly, right? So the removals that you want when you're playing aggro, if they can't go face, they have to be tempo oriented, right? Naturalize, Hunter's Mark, Sap. Those are the cards that you want. And because, and notice, some of these cards have a significant downside, right? Or just a downside. Like Sap gives the card back. Naturalize gives them more cards. Hunter's Mark, you need something else, right? But for Hunter's Mark, you should be on the board anyways. If you're off the board, you're probably dead, right? Like you're probably dead. And for Sap and Naturalize, you don't really care about card advantage, right? You're aggro, you just don't have those cards. So if it's something that can't go face, I'm looking for those sorts of cards. And this is also why, aggressive rogue doesn't really work nowadays, but when I was playing
aggressive rogue totally works.
Not like true aggro.
Okay, fine.
Like, you know what I'm talking.
Yeah,
Like the
yeah,
days
yeah.
of the Buccaneers, triple
Yeah,
cold
yeah.
blood, like
Uh-huh.
true aggro rogue.
Now it's kind
Um,
of like a half-assed aggro rogue that also draws a lot of cards later.
that draws a lot of cards, exactly.
But it's still
Um,
aggro rather than like zoo, right? It's like aggro control, right? Like, which is
yeah, sure.
um,
Right. And then, they'll have like a Faldori Strider and be like, eventually I'm going to swarm you.
mhm.
But anyways, so like way back then as well, Assassinate was always the card that is sort of like, this is just a little bit awkward,
Yeah.
Like I don't love Assassinate or something like that. Um, and when you're Hunter, I love Hunter's Mark, right? Hunter's Mark is amazing. Deadly Shot is like pretty good, but the problem that you always have is just because you're going face and you're leaving stuff on the board, they put down a big taunt, and then you have your like they have like a dinky Firefly or two, right? That you didn't care about, but now you kind of care about. So that's always one of the problems with the Deadly Shot. That's just the general rule, right? Like if it can't go face, I need to make sure it's tempo oriented.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not tempo oriented and it can't go face, something like Assassinate, if I'm true aggro, don't love it.
Yep. So yeah.
All right.
Personally, I like crushing walls even in an aggro deck, but I understand my aggro is not as aggro as your aggro.
No.
It's also like when you start off with saying turn 7, I'm like, it should be turn 8. It shouldn't be turn 7. But that's the difference, right?
7.
Like
that's because
when
you
I
don't play aggro. That's because
okay.
you think you play aggro.
I think I play aggro, but I don't really play aggro. I apparently play the turn 8 aggro, not the mystical turn 7 aggro. That is true aggro. I've fallen one turn behind the true aggro line. But if you're thinking about the game in terms of 8 turns, then crushing walls is great because crushing walls eliminates everything your opponent can do on one turn, and it is the turn in which your board is at its largest. Because remember, the game is over on turn. You can say turn 7, I say turn 8, whatever, right? But the game is over on that turn, and if it's over on turn 7, that means if you don't crushing walls on turn 7, crushing walls was not worth it, right? So it's like you have a very low margin of error. But if I'm thinking turn 8, then if you're crushing walls on turn 7 or turn 8, and at some point they're going to do something like play 2 big taunts or like 1 big taunt and 1 something else. And then crushing walls lets all of your minions through. And that's a lot of reach that you otherwise wouldn't have. And so that's why I like crushing walls. And the chances that you'll get this card, like in the early going up through turn 7 or 8, versus the chance you'll top deck it afterwards when you're like trying to hang on is very favorable. Because you don't have a lot of turns left in the game before you just like kind of lose. So I actually really like crushing walls. I've had a lot of success with crushing walls in I guess less aggressive than true aggro, but very aggressive hunter decks nonetheless. Just because you're thinking of ways to convert tempo into reach. So kill command may be 5 face damage, but crushing walls can convert like all of your tempo on the board into reach, and the amount of tempo you have on your board should probably be more than like 7 damage. And then you're better than kill command. So it's a little less flexible, but I personally like if kill command was just 5 damage face, fine. But the fact that kill command also needs a synergy card makes me a little shaky on it, even if you have normal amounts of like beast synergies.
Yep. All right. So I wanted to get a last couple of points. These are some things you need to watch out for when you play aggro, or just some mistakes that I see people make, right? And one of the things is I think people worry too much about card draw because they see aggro running out of cards a lot, and they're like, don't you need to refuel, right? Remember, the game is over by turn 7. It doesn't matter how many cards a person has in their hand, because the bottleneck, the thing by you playing aggro, you have made mana the bottleneck, not sort of the the amount of turns, right? Not the amount of cards.
That's why going second sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're missing essentially.
Yeah, like you get one more card, and then you get like a small mana swing, and you're like, can I trade this card for one more mana? Like, can I please, instead of getting one extra card, get a rogue coin instead? That would be better for me as player 2 even.
Yeah. If you're aggro, yes, that matters a whole lot. So don't worry about card draw. And especially because a lot of times card draw, you either develop nothing or you develop something that is way understated, right? Gnomish Inventor, good
Yeah.
example, right? That is a great example. Or even something like, and this pains people, but something like a Bone Drake,
Bone Drake
right?
is so terrible. Like for
Exactly.
aggro, so terrible.
Because what it's even worse than sometimes than like a Gnomish Inventor, because Gnomish Inventor can draw you closer to that kill command.
Mm-hmm.
Bone Drake
Yeah.
never draws you an aggro oriented card.
Yes. Dragons are
It
not
never
aggro
does.
oriented.
No, they're value oriented, and Bone Drake by itself is a very good card, but it's one of those trap cards,
And it's
right?
even worse because, like, how many dragons are more than 7 mana? Game's over
Yeah,
on turn 7. You
like
want a hero
yeah,
power after that. You can't be playing an 8 mana dragon until turn 10.
right. So that is a common trap card that I see. Second, you want to make sure that the cards that you like, the minions that you put out, actually put pressure on your opponent. And this is where the Basilisk thing comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
What like Basilisk does put pressure on an opponent, but in a way that you don't want. It puts board pressure, right? It doesn't put face pressure, it puts board pressure. So if we're looking at, and it's sort of like a fulcrum kind of thing. Like if you just look at a Yeti, it puts kind of equal amounts face pressure and board pressure, right? Like that's just sort of your standard minion. Something like a Basilisk puts very, very little face pressure, tons and tons of board pressure, right? It kills anything on the board essentially. Um, and it has its uses. But what happens when you as a hunter put a gastropod on turn 2 followed by a basilisk on turn 3? You put a lot of board pressure, but the control deck is like, I just bought myself 2 turns,
Yeah.
right? It's not a turn 7 game anymore. You have, even though you used up your mana, have made it into at least, a turn 9 sort of game. And they can just like hold still and be like, okay, I'm gonna like, even though like this aggro deck played a turn 2 and a turn 3, I'm gonna make it to my Blizzard and then further make it to my Primordial Drake. When if you had put out a Raptor into like a 3/4, right, like an Amalgam or a Blackwalled Pixie or something, they know it's like, oh shoot, even when I do make it to turn 6, I'm gonna be at 6 health, and then they just hero power me down. So I'm not saying never draft Basilisk. It's still going to be a good card. But once again, we have buckets now. So when you see that Basilisk, and when we, I think when we put up the latest video of the 12-win Hunter, right? I think one of the comments was just like, why do you hate Basilisk? It's like you take Bow over it every single time. It's like Basilisk kills everything. I'm like, you know what Bow kills? Kills the face. And it's just one of those things where you need to be aware. A lot of the things that are so good in other classes, right, are significantly worse when you have this aggressive mindset. So yeah, be careful of basilisks. Be careful of like, the gastropods, the wasps. They're still good. You're still going to draft them. The value is just going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And lastly, this is just the last point. People already know this, but don't trade too much. And here's the thing: is so like people are going to be like, well, yeah, duh. That's sort of the point of aggro. If you do not know what the punish is, if you cannot tell yourself exactly what the punish is, like you're looking at this trade and you're just like, oh, I could be punished. Oh, I could be punished right here. Oh, that makes me uncomfortable. When you're playing aggro, always play by this rule. You have to identify the exact punish that you're afraid of in order to make that trade. If you cannot tell yourself that punish, you go face. And
remember, the punish has to matter.
It has to matter, right? It has to matter. So it has to be a punish that matters. And then look, it's also a learning opportunity. Sometimes you didn't think of something, they punish you, and you learn, right? You learn, and also evaluate it. If it was just something like a 3-card combo out of nowhere, right? Then no, like don't
But
play
okay,
around that.
here's a punish that you need to play around as aggro. Like you may not play around MCT because I don't think you can.
As aggro, you most of the time you can't.
Like sorry, on the bright side, they don't get that much value out of MCT because your minions are crap. But play around Shadow Madness. Play around it. And I don't mean like don't put more minions out to it. I mean make sure they can only kill one of your minions when they use Shadow Madness. Make sure they can't grab your 3-1 and throw it into your 3-3. Like if that's the case, you can play anything besides a 3-3, including anti-tempoing. Do that because priests these days have so many Shadow Madnesses.
Yep, I think that's fair. Or like if you're so ahead and the Shadow Madness ring doesn't matter, because if they bump the 3-1 to a 3-3, but you still have a 5-5 on the board.
Right. I just mean don't play that second 3-3.
Oh yeah.
Like that's my thing. If you were debating whether to play at 5-5, yeah, that doesn't really matter. Like, you know, you already had your Shadow Madness targets on the board. And also don't like you never prep for anything. Like I hear a lot of people, it's like, you know, it's my turn 4 and I play a whole bunch of things at 2 health and they're like, oh, Blizzard in 2 turns. It's like, okay, if my minions are on the board and it hits the opponent's face once, I'm good. Like, you can Blizzard that thing away. You're still, you know, spending mana to remove my minions. I'm fine. Never prepare 1 turn ahead when it comes to tempo. Prepare 2 turns ahead when it comes to face damage.
Yes, that is good. So, once again, this rule that I just talked about, that addresses the uncomfortable sort of anxiety that people feel, right? And this is why, like, whenever I try to teach someone about aggro, I'm like, you better be able to tell yourself exactly what the punish is. Otherwise, you go face, right? And then, like, that's just how it has to be. And that's how I got better with aggro. Because a long, long time ago, ADWCTA was the more aggressively oriented player, right? I was sort of the play it safe kind of person. And then soon it was just me embracing the percentages, right? Embracing the percentages, embracing the unknowns. And once again, just forcing myself to face this sort of like amorphous anxiety. I was like, man, I'm worried. So I should trade, because trading is comfortable, right? That's your safety blanket. You trade, like that's
and
good.
And you know how to trade. That's what you've been practicing as fundamentals since you started learning Hearthstone.
So, but when you play aggro, like whenever you are afraid, but you can't identify what it is, and if you're good at the game, most of the time it doesn't exist, and you're just helping out your opponents. That's it. So make sure you do this exercise. And by doing this exercise, it will just make you so much better at the game, period. Just so much better at the game. And you're going to see your win rate skyrocket as aggro, because I think the thing that holds people back the most is just this anxiety, this amorphous kind of like fear of something bad is going to happen if I leave this on the board. So that's kind of it. Aggro, easy.
I mean, look, you could play mid-range all the time, or like some derivation of mid-range, but eventually you get bored of mid-range, right? And then you aggro's fun. Between aggro and control, I think aggro is more fun, but like they're the harder stuff to play than mid-range. Mid-range may be more nuanced in terms of how each thing affects everything else, but it's also really your decisions matter the least. In mid-range, your decisions are the easiest to make for the most part. Let's move on to card good bad. This has gotten really long.
It has. Yeah.
In card good bad, it was good. It's a very good like treatise on how to do aggro, and it will hold true in like any kind of meta. Like we put a little bit of meta things in here, but for the most part, you can listen to this like a year from now. Assuming they don't do a new version of the bucket system or whatever, it'll be the same. We got to do one of these for control one of these days. I feel like we talked more about control after like Cabals and Catacombs when the meta really got more control, And then since Witchwood, we just haven't talked about control because it's been like, oh, it's already there. It's doing the same thing. But Witchwood is a very like safe kind of expansion, and Card Good Bad, which is what we're going to end on. This is one of the cards, and we previewed this maybe like a month ago before the Taverns of Time got in the way, and now we'll finally get to it. It's on our subreddit / which is the Grinning Goat subreddit, and we put our Card Good Bad on there like 1 week ahead of time now, so that there could be some discussion on it, and we read through all the comments. And Rotten Apple Bomb, I think, is just kind of an interesting card in terms of design. So Primordial Drake was like a broken design in my opinion, or just a really powerful design in other people's opinions, and it does 2 things that you want as control. It double-sided board clears, which is the most powerful kind of board clear when you're control, and then it taunts up something with medium attack and high health. That's like literally like the worst things that you like. It's your nightmare, right? As an aggro player. Rotten Apple Bomb is not as bad, but it's similar. It's putting together a 4/5 taunt, which is it's not like a 3/6 taunt or anything, but it's still pretty bad. And on top of that, it gives you 4 heal when it dies. So even if you remove it, it still does a decent amount for a player that's trying to survive aggro. So we asked people how it was, and I think consensus is that it's kind of like a fair card. There's some trade-offs. People kind of like it more and more. And we have it rated a 100. That's kind of where it is. But I thought it was an interesting card to talk about, because the question is not like how good exactly this card is. The card's okay to put in your deck, nothing spectacular or whatever, but it's very much of you need to identify what you're doing with this card in your deck before you put it in, or else it's really just kind of But if you have identified a need in your deck, this could be like a 150-point card quite easily, a 200-point card quite easily. Because what you're trying to do against aggro is not even just put up a bunch of taunts, which is helpful, but you want to make it so that all of their tools don't work against you. And you only have to do it for 7 turns, right? Like Merps was saying, you only have to do it 7-8 turns. So anything that you can do in your deck helps. If you can do Rotten Apple Bomb-esque things 4 times in your first 8 turns, you win the game against every aggro deck. Every single one of them. And there's nothing the aggro deck can do, which is what makes aggro players feel bad. And, it's not going to be that possible to do that consistently. But if that's one of your deck's weaknesses, is getting rushed down, you put a Rotten Apple Bomb in your deck, and it solves your problem like 25% of the time. 1 card in your deck. Like, you're going to draw it half the time in a meaningful manner. And because remember, Rotten Apple Bomb is one of those rare taunts where your opponent could have gotten you pretty low, and it still has an effect. Not just a taunt, but you can purposefully try to kill it to heal that 4 to prevent the reach. Like, it's such a multifaceted tool. But I'm glad Blizzard learned from Primordial Drake and that this is actually balanced.
Yep. So, if we go to the thread in the subreddit, Tachi and Amoxes both make a good point in that if you look at the HS replay stats on Rotten Apple Bomb, they are terrible.
I wonder why.
Yeah. It has an extremely bad win rate. So Tachi pointed out that it has similar statistics as Rattling Rascal. And essentially, it makes sense with a card like this, right? It's a card that does not fit in every deck.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have to realize what kind of deck and what your game plan is in order for this card, which is a 5-mana minion that, it taunts, but it doesn't immediately impact the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is understated. You have to really know your deck for a card like this to fit in. And Tachi also commented that it's, another consideration is there are, these days, there are quite a few good 5-mana neutral cards.
Mm-hmm.
Fungalmancer, Sunborn Valkyr, Nesting Rock, Corrosive Sludge, Stranglethorn Tiger. These are all cards that are really good and aren't understated like Rotten Apple Bomb, right? So I think the win rate comes from a lot of people looking at Constructed, where Rotten Apple Bomb is played a ton for good reason, right? Those are cohesive decks. They really like the fact that you get the heal. Healing your face is always a lot more important in Constructed than it is in the arena. And they try to make that work in arena, and it just isn't the case. It's not a card that works in every single deck. So, yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about it.
We should say something about the buckets, which is that Rotten Apple Bomb is in the same bucket as Yeti, which is actually kind of high. It is, I forget which exact bucket it is, maybe third, maybe fourth bucket. Which is pretty high for something that we rate at 100. And so that's why, like I said, right, like if your deck doesn't really work with it, it's an ant card, don't take it. If your deck does work with it, it can easily be much better than a fourth bucket. It could be much better than a Yeti. So it's evaluate your deck here. It was below that. Rotten Apple Bomb, I mean, it's moved around a bit. And if anything, I think once Blizzard moves it again, it's going to move down one more bucket, and then it'll be even more draftable. But yeah, I think that's it for this Lightforge. You have any final thoughts?
I think that's it. I'm glad we had this talk about aggro. And you're right. I think this podcast should hold, right? Like we should be able to point back to this whenever people have questions about aggro, just because we have made it such that these principles should just generally apply.
Yeah.
Just generally apply as long as Hearthstone is here and it doesn't, the fundamental rules of Hearthstone and the arena are the same. I think this podcast will hold for all eternity.
Yay.
Yay.
Next week's Card Good Bad is going to be everyone's favorite card from Classic. I want to throw back before when they announce the next expansion, because no one's going to care about which cards when they make the next expansion. So we're going to go back. We're going to go way back. We're going to go to the number one card listed by mana order in this game. Wisp. Let us know your thoughts on Wisp, how good it is, and keep in mind, it's infinite value. Literally infinite value for tempo. That's it. That's it from us, and see you next week on the Lightforge podcast, and we'll talk about the announcements for the expansion, anything new that comes out of that, and a lot about Wisp. I'm going to talk for at least 15 minutes about Wisp. Guarantee it. Until then, all right. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. See you guys.
All right, so don't kill me, but I